Hermansson versus Strickland, guys, that's going down this weekend, and that's an interesting match. It's an interesting match stylistically, but save the X's and O's. What's on the line? It's a main event fight, so it's a featured bout in the middleweight division, of which the championship is going to be contested in 10 days. So whoever wins between Izzy versus Whitaker is going to be looking for their next opponent. Who's in line? Look, I know that Cannonier and Brunson appear to be the front runners. Cannonier and Brunson are positive that they've already been given that nod. I haven't heard it. I haven't heard anybody say that's a number one contenders fight, and it certainly would not be argued if it was. Awesome and competitive fight. But if that's not been said to be the number one contenders fight, or it has been, it still brings the same question, which is, well, then what's Sean fighting for? Just fighting to get a win? Just fighting to entertain us? Okay, I can live with that. But generally, main events aren't that way. There's something that you're looking at. There's a reason that they're out there. And it's really tough because I do believe that Sean Strickland goes head-to-head with anybody on paper. Absolutely anybody. No matter how well they've done, and Cannonier and Brunson certainly done well, Sean goes head-to-head with them. You want to talk about who's won the most fights, who's done it most impressively, who's done it in the bigger positions. I think he goes head-to-head. Who's done it the most times? He goes head-to-head. So the question becomes, with parity, I think that tips the scale in Sean's favor, but that's my opinion. I think that Adesanya, I'm following the golden rule, put myself in somebody else's shoes before I try to act what they would want to do. If I were in Adesanya's shoes, I would like to spread it around. I would like to have new guys and new bodies, new opportunities, new challenges, new faces across from me. I'm assuming that Izzy's in agreement there, but he might not. Izzy might see an advantage in taking on the same guy multiple times. So hold that thought. Look at it from the perspective that Adesanya would prefer to give the nod to somebody new as opposed to give the nod to somebody that he's already faced, which could be wrong by me. That is an assumption. I think that favors Strickland. Now, can Strickland get it done against Jack? And if Strickland is going to be in the very small table for conversation and discussion of being the next opponent to the winner of Adesanya Whitaker, if that's going to be the case, why am I not saying the same thing for Jack? Well, Jack doesn't demand anything. In all fairness, Jack, right? Nobody gets a world title fight before asking for it. Your favorite fighter will never get a world title fight until you and fellow fans come and start to ask for it, start to build that fire. Jack hasn't even began that process. And if you do look at the X's and O's of this match, man, it's interesting. Sean is an overall mixed martial artist, but if you go watch his career closely, you just go watch each fight in each round, he does his best work on his feet. He's a bear to take off of his feet. He seldomly tries to take you off of his, and even if he would go into the mixed martial arts category, he's still a striking specialist, I think, is the conclusion you would draw. For sure, you would conclude that Jack is a grappling specialist. Sean knows that. Sean knows full well what he's getting into. Even if I'm asking the question of why, what is this about? Sean knows what skills Jack brings. And I can insert myself here. Sean came out, did a submission underground. And he said, I want to do the match because I'm getting ready to fight Jack Hermansson. And this was before it was announced. Sean told me this before it was even announced that this fight was going to happen. He said, I'm going to be fighting Jack next, which is a great job on the ground. I would like to stop by a pure grappling competition as a way of preparing to go to the ground with Jack. Okay. All that tells me is that Sean has studied his opponent. Sean has studied it, prepared for it, and didn't just talk about it, took the steps, took the dangers, took the risks to be prepared for when this fight goes off. Does that play into your opinion of who it's going to favor? You got to understand how good Jack is. Jack's more than good. Jack has had nights where he was great. Jack has had certain performances that on certain other nights would have won him the world championship. Jack was brought in, and this is the big one for me, but I got to go back to the Jacare fight. It wasn't just getting the jump on Jacare and how he did it. It was the time frame that he had to prepare to do it. Because all of a sudden, Jack's out there all night long. We have to only assume that he was not at his peak, and he pushed hard all night long. That's another skill that Sean has. They could cross each other out. Conditioning is always an intangible. It's always a factor. Worst case scenario, they go the distance. Who can hold up longer than their opponent? That's where your confidence comes from. Confidence never comes from a fighter for being faster or being more powerful or being more experienced. Not from the fighter. The bettor can have their own say in that, but the fighter himself will ask himself one question and only one question, which is in a worst case scenario, who's going to be more exhausted, me or him? And if you're confident that you can go harder longer than him, you have confidence in the fight. Confidence does not always equate to a victory. Confidence is one of these weird words that started in athletics, and people say you have to have confidence. No, you don't. You do not. But if you're going to have confidence, it's going to be derived from one place, which is, can I hold up longer than he can? Can I follow the golden rule? Can I have enough energy to protect myself at all times? A combat athlete's biggest fear is not losing. It is reaching exhaustion and not being able to finish the match. So I bring that to you. Which one of those guys is in better shape? That's a hard question. Who's better on the ground? It would appear Jack. Who's better on their feet? It would appear Sean. Hard fight, close fight. I want these guys to get the credit they deserve. Jack does not demand credit. Sean is yet to start banging the drum, but this is his second main event against his second awesome opponent that will make it 8 wins in a row. His last loss in a different division to sitting king Kamaru Usman. He looks good. He looks good. Is this a number one contenders fight? Nobody's told us it is. I don't know that that ever needs to be stated, and I don't know that it can be, politically speaking. You don't want to declare this the number one contenders fight. All of a sudden, then what are Brunson and Cannonier fighting about? You just took their motivation away. And I've seen these positions get tested. We just saw the same scenario. It was Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler with Islam Makhachev looming. And Dana was in a hard spot. He didn't want to deny Islam, but he also didn't want to take any motivation away from what went on to be not only the fight of the night, but the fight of the year. It's one of those spots where, hey, good options. Let's see what happens. Let's readdress this down the road. I think a win here for Strickland specifically puts him in that conversation. I think that conversation is exactly where he should be. Adesanya is one of the very few guys in the entire sport, not just champions, in the entire sport that takes a say in his own career. Adesanya will not leave that ring after Whitaker should he get his hand raised without setting up his next fight. He never has before. You want to be the name that he calls. How do you become that name? How do you position yourself? How much is poking the bear and how much is upsetting him? How much is annoying him and making him not give you that blessing? Right? There's a lot of parts here. There's a lot at stake. It's kind of fun when it's a little clear, boom, number one contenders fight. But we can also see why we don't get to that spot. I don't know if there's ever been a time for Sean or Hermansson that's more imperative to win.